And now for something completely different.
Forget everything you've been told by others before. Get ready for the real deal, the full story. Real talk about money, markets, life. Now, it's The Real Investment Show with Lance Roberts, presented by RIA Advisors.
And good morning and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Lance Roberts, of course, for The Real Investment Show. And it is Hump Day. And unfortunately, as we talked about yesterday, if you're watching our live stream, I got a lot of emails yesterday. It's like, are you off the air? No, yeah, technically we are off the air right now. The radio station we broadcast on is out of commission till hopefully maybe just later on today.
Maybe tomorrow,
right?
yeah.
So the interesting news about that is I want to talk to you about something this morning that I couldn't say if we were actually on the radio station, because if we were on the radio station, it's very conservative, right-wing, Republican station. I am about as fiscally conservative as you're going to find. Patriotic. I'm a gun-toting American. I got a whole closet full of guns. I own, look, I believe in America and capitalism and apple pie and mom and, that's me, right? Christian values, that is who I am down to the core. And, I listen to these conservatives on radio, and it's so interesting because they are now wrapped up in this whole meme about communist China. Communist China, communist China, those damn commies, boy. It sounds like we've got McCarthyism all starting over in America now, as everything is about commie China. Boy, don't mess with those commies. Don't spend your money in communist China. Let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. You are about this far away, and since you're watching a stream, I don't have to describe this. You're about this far away from being communist America. What is communism? Communism is when the government tells you to do things, and you don't have a choice. Communism is a state-run country. It is where the government dictates what you do, where you go, how you do things. Let's talk about America for a moment. The government just told you that you had to stay locked in your house for the last month and a half for your own good. Maybe that's the case, but that's not the point. The point is the government told you under order of mandate that you could not leave your house or be penalized. There was even threats of jail time if you were caught out socially mingling with other individuals. You could be put in jail for that. Communist China also tells you what you must do, right? We just told businesses all across this country they had to shut down. We're a capitalist society, right? We're supposed to be a capitalist country, which means that as individuals, we have the right to run our businesses and to build our businesses. But yet the government just told us we couldn't do it. Okay, well, yeah, that was for our own good. Okay. You know what else Communist China does? Communist China tracks their population. They know where they go, what they do, who they talk to, who they socially talk to on the internet, what they see on the internet. We just passed a bill, or the House Democrats just passed a bill that says they want to apply about $50 billion to contact tracing. What is that? Well, that's basically an app on your phone that tracks who you've been in contact with. And of course, after that, then they can go back, and if you come down with symptoms, then they can go back in your phone and contact all the other people that you've been in contact with because of the GPS location on your phone. That's contact tracing. All the people you've been in touch with. Which means they also have the data of everything you've done, everywhere you've been, and what you've been doing. Of course, we've been doing this for quite some time anyway. The government's been tracking you now for the last several years, right? Through metadata and all this stuff. And they say, oh, don't worry, it's all for your own good. We only track this information to protect you from yourself, right? Because we have all these external national threats that we've got to be careful of, right? Terrorism and all this other stuff. Maybe that's the case. That's what we're told anyway. See, we're told that in America, that all these rights that we have given up for either convenience or for national security is in our all best interest. Right? See, we're not smart enough to do these things ourselves, but the government needs to do this for us, right? The government needs to make sure that we're taken care of and that we're protected. That's what China does. It's exactly what China does. It's what communism is. Communism is a state-run, state-funded society. And we're gradually moving in that direction, but yet it's interesting to listen to all these conservatives on radio railing against communist China. Oh, they're such bad people. The stuff that they're doing in their country is not so far and away different than what we do in our country. Oh, they're China. Boy, communist China. They're currency manipulators. We've been manipulating the U.S. dollar since 1900. Every country does. We manipulate our currency to make sure that we've got the best advantage for our country. They're doing the exact same thing. Look, I'm not supporting communism. Don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is that very quietly in the background, the things that we have agreed to allow our government to do is leading us down the path towards both communism or /socialism. We just almost put a socialist up on the national stage for a president of the United States. He ran twice, almost got nominated twice, Bernie Sanders. If you don't think we're heading towards socialism, socialism and communism are not that far apart. If you don't think we're headed there, you're sorely mistaken. And it's just interesting to listen to these conservative commentators who, individuals buy into hook, line, and sinker, who don't know anything in a lot of cases about how economics actually work, about how politics actually work to a great degree, but more importantly, don't understand the direction of this country. We support these things that the government does in terms of these spending bills. It's terrible. This is the worst thing. What the Federal Reserve is doing right now, what the government is doing, and everybody buys into this like, oh, well, the government has to do this, right? The government's got to send us all this money. We've got to have these monthly paychecks. We've got to have this because, if we don't do that, boy, the poor average Joe, they're just going to be out on the street. The problem is that we have become more and more dependent upon government for self-sufficiency over the last 30 years. The amount of income, disposable personal income made up by government transfers is at the highest level on record ever, and that was even before the COVID crisis. 1 out of 4 families before the crisis were dependent upon the government for almost the entirety of their income. 25% of the entire population had some form of government subsidy that supported their incomes. That's socialism. These are the things that we're allowing to do. If we all want to have prosperity, we all want capitalism to work, we all want to be free, right? These are the things that we do. These are the things that we want. We want capitalism to be the foundation of our country. We want capitalism to provide for, just as it did for the greatest generation, we want capitalism to provide for our future generations as well, but yet doing everything possible to erode the ability for capitalism to work. And what the Federal Reserve is doing is destroying capitalism entirely.
Say that again, your mic broke out.
So again, what we're doing, and my mic just broke out apparently, but again, what the Federal Reserve is doing is destroying capitalism. But, when we come back from the break, look, we got a lot of stuff to get into this morning. I just want you to think about when you listen to the radio and hear people railing against communist China, just remember exactly how much we're doing that's just like communist China to start with. When we come back from the break, we'll pick up with Danny Ratliff, CFP. I also want to touch on a little bit about the Moderna case yesterday. When we come back, I want to show you something about what happened with Moderna. Of course, they came out with this vaccine situation, and the stock rose and the market rallied, and we had some more news on it yesterday. But I want to come back and tell you what Moderna did and why you should be really upset about it. We'll be right back on The Real Investment Show. Don't go away.
Like this.
Get daily investment news you can use, delivered at the speed of the internet. Sign up for the Real Investment Report now at realinvestmentadvice.com.
Did you miss the Great Reset webinar?
Fret not.
The Great Reset webinar replay is available online now at realinvestmentadvice.com. In a post-COVID world of social distancing, face masks, and fear, you can thrive in the Great Reset. RIA advisors guide you through 12 smart money moves in an economic crisis, underemployment, severance packages, and what you need to know about bear markets. The Great Reset webinar replay, free at realinvestmentadvice.com. realinvestmentadvice.com.
Life is a series of events. How long will your retirement last? More importantly, how long will your retirement funds last? Plan for a successful retirement with RIA Advisors' free financial planning tool, MyBlocks. It's our online modular manager for your money and your life. Does your vision of retirement match up to reality? MyBlocks can help to determine how much you'll need and how to achieve that goal. Create your own personal financial vision for the next decade with MyBlocks, our free tool at RIAadvisors.com. That's RIAadvisors.com.
For the best proprietary stock and ETF analysis by Lance Roberts, subscribe now to the new professional version of Real Investment Advice, RIA Pro. You'll get the expanded newsletter and critical investment information you need with the professional version of Real Investment Advice, RIA Pro. Subscribe now at realinvestmentadvice.com and click on the RIA Pro tab. The Pro site is now operational. Subscribe now at realinvestmentadvice.com and click on the RIA Pro tab. RIA Pro.
Catch Lance Roberts' podcasts later at realinvestmentadvice.com.
Show, Danny Ratliff. Oh, sorry. Good morning. Welcome to the show this morning. I'm over here talking away. It's going to be one of those mornings. It's a Wednesday. It's hump day on the Real Investment Show. I'm your host, Lance Roberts. Danny Ratliff joining me this morning as well. Before I get over to Danny, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the market over the last couple of days, in particular in relation to Moderna. We talked about this a little bit on Monday. On Monday, the market had a huge up day. We're up about 1,000 points on the Dow. I mean, it was just a huge up day in the markets. And that was really driven by two things. One was the Jerome Powell's 60-minute interview on Sunday, talking about, well, they're still, they've got unlimited QE. They can do whatever they want. Not really the case, because they are limited by the amount of debt that is available to purchase from the government. But different story for a different day. But the other was this announcement by Moderna that they had potentially a cure, right? And we talked about this a little bit on Monday, because what they did is they tested 5-6 people who were completely healthy, gave them this injection, and they started to develop some of the kind of the antibodies that you would develop if you had the illness. And so very positive news that morning. And of course, this is the chart of Moderna behind me. And on Friday, the stock closed at about $67 a share right here. Now, Moderna opened the next morning at $76 a share. Now, that was the interesting number. When it opened up, it actually opened right at 80, but it floated down to 76 very quickly in the open, and then kind of rallied up towards 86 during the day. But why is this $76 number so important is the issue. And notice that there's a very large gap between where it closed on Friday and the $76 number. Well, that was because before they made the announcement, they had organized a secondary stock offering to offer more shares of stock out to the public with a 2.6 million share uplift to their institutional partners, which allowed institutions to buy an additional 2.6 million shares of Moderna that they could then turn around and sell to whom? Who would institutions sell their shares to? That would be you. Because you were clamoring when you heard this news to jump in there and buy this stock. And so you go, man, this is great. They've got the cure, right? Well, they came out, they made this announcement. The stock opens up magically at $80 a share, sells down exactly to $76 a share, exactly where the secondary was priced. Now, why does this matter? Well, because this matters because yesterday, another firm that actually does real research came out and said, that stock really, that vaccine really doesn't work like they said it did. This was a fantastic pump and dump that was actually put together by Moderna to get you to buy their shares so that they could add access and liquidity to their company. This is what happens in financial markets, and you've got to be really careful about what you invest in and how you invest, and make sure you understand what's actually going on. Just don't go chase news stories because they come out on CNBC and some idiot on the talking head tells you that, oh, there's a vaccine cure, you need to buy this stock. Understand what's going on with the stock. They came out and specifically made that announcement when they made it to support their stock offering that they've been putting together for the last month to get it to market, and well priced above where they actually had it. So again, just pay attention to what you do with your money. This is the thing that we talk about here on the show all the time, is doing the right thing with your money over time and making sure that as you do these things that you don't wind up getting yourself in trouble. So pay attention to, don't pay attention just to headlines. If you're going to buy individual stocks, make sure you do some of the research as well. Let's go over here and talk with Danny Ratliff this morning. Danny, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. You're fired up today. I love it.
It's a Wednesday.
Man.
So
kind of interesting, Lance. You talked about, some of the changes in the first segment of what we're seeing as far as the dynamics of the country. So Forbes yesterday had a poll, and it said 82% want a monthly stimulus check. Mm-hmm. So you start thinking about some of the socialist or even communist agendas and how those typically work over time. You talked about slowly slipping into some of these things. And it's interesting to think that if you interviewed most Americans, I think they would be, very prideful for the most part. I think that, they would be against communism, socialism, but nobody's against free money.
But see, that's how it starts. It's like slipping into a warm bath, right? And what you don't realize is that warm bath is like a big pot of boiling water. It's the old frog story, right?
Yeah.
How do you boil a frog? Very
Yeah.
slowly. But it's that idea, right? Which is, it's just $1,000 a month per person, right? No big deal. That's recycled tax dollars. And this is the whole premise of socialism, which is, the government basically supports you, and that's fine. Cradle to the grave. That's what we want from government. But it's a cost, right? It's a cost of freedom. It's a cost of economic stability, and it's a cost of prosperity. Because in order to support that, at some point, your tax rate has to be 70, 80, 90% of your income.
And that scares me to death.
Yeah. But this is what happens. This was the big lie you were told by the Trump administration when we passed tax cuts. We have to pass corporate tax cuts because we need to make sure our corporations are competitive on a nation on a global scale. And you all bought into that, right? Oh yeah, we need tax cuts. I warned you then that doing tax cuts at the end of an economic expansion, A, was a bad idea because you wouldn't get any benefit from it, which is exactly what happened. But B, we already had the lowest tax rate in the world because we don't have a VAT tax, which every other country does, a value-added tax. So yes, other countries have higher had corporate taxes that were lower than our statutory corporate tax rate, which, by the way, our statutory corporate tax rate was 35%.
But nobody pays that.
Exactly. The average tax rate paid by corporations was 15% going into the tax cuts. It's now down to 10% post the tax cuts. So even though we cut taxes, they were already well below that statutory rate. But even though we had a higher statutory rate than other countries, we didn't have the VAT tax. So when you put those two taxes together that other corporations pay elsewhere in the world, they were already at a much higher rate. But you were suckered into this deal to pass these corporate tax cuts, which turns out to be bad for economic growth. And we get slower rates of economic growth because of it. And now we're throwing on top of this, now that we have lower tax revenue from corporations, lower tax rates for individuals, and lower tax revenue coming in, and particularly now that we've got a 50 million people unemployed and not paying payroll taxes, now you're slapping on the top of this a $4 trillion deficit. I'm sorry, it's now going to be $5 trillion. Oh, I'm sorry, it's going to be $8 trillion if Democrats get this bill passed. You're going to have an $8 trillion deficit, not to mention 29 to 30 trillion in debt by the time this is all said and done, and you've got lower tax revenue to pay for it. Where does that show up? That shows up in economic growth.
Well, and what's really going to hurt is so this survey on Forbes actually went and said, okay, 76% of self-identified Republicans want universal health care. 84% of self-identified Democrats do as well. Mortgage and rent payments, 55% of Americans say they want those to be frozen completely. Student loans, 63% of those should not have to be paid now, which we've heard the sentiment on that for years. Unemployment, 79% say the federal government should do more to help those who are unemployed, but only 58% said the government should provide more financial support. So now you start tackling, you add all this up, and now you want a bigger stimulus check.
Right.
So what's the new deal? They want $2,000 a month permanently?
Yes.
I mean, so
That's called
universal.
That's called universal basic income now.
Yeah, of course. Well, so now you shouldn't have to pay any of your bills, but you should also get money in the interim for it.
Right. But again, it sounds great. Why wouldn't I want $2,000 a month in income?
Whatever happened to independence, financial independence, to doing the right things, to making those hard decisions? That's what's so frustrating behind all of the things that have been done here. And not only that, but it's just like you have the government propping up companies, backing junk bonds. Now you have them backing up the average American, which, look, I know there's tons of people out there who are hurting. This is a bad environment. But at what point do we say enough is enough? Let's get back on our own 2 feet. Let's open things up, which we're seeing now. But the devastation's been done. Like you said, 50 million people out of work every single day. And I say this often, but I don't say this lightly. I'm talking to people who get pay cuts, who aren't showing up in these numbers. You talk about people who've been severance packages. I mean, one of the most common questions, we did a webinar this weekend, was what do we do next? Where do we go from here? Do we roll a 401k to an IRA? Do we leave it in the 401k? Navigating healthcare, that's a big issue. Now you have a lot of people who are working later past 65 who are going to have to get on Medicare at some point. Right. You have a certain window here. So there's lots of questions, I think lots of uncertainty. And then we have the government who, going to give you more. But unfortunately, we know what that means. They're going to take more.
Well, and the reason, but when we come back from the break, we'll talk about why we're here.
Yeah.
Right? We got to, in order to understand why we're here, we got to understand what we did to get here, and then we can talk a little bit about potentially ways to fix it that we'll never do.
No, it's too hard.
Well, it's not that it's too hard. It's also because our government is run by corporations now.
Well, but it'd mean austerity, and nobody wants that.
Well, not necessarily austerity, but when corporations control your government, you don't pass the bills necessary to start to create better economic prosperity across the country. We'll talk about it when we come back. Don't go away.
Nobody told you how to unfold your life.
Catch the best of The Real Investment Show anytime, anywhere from Stitcher Smart Radio. Download podcasts of The Real Investment Show from Stitcher.com.
Did you miss the Great Reset webinar?
Fret not.
The Great Reset webinar replay is available online now at realinvestmentadvice.com. In a post-COVID world of social distancing, face masks, and fear, you can thrive in the Great Reset. RIA Advisors guide you through 12 smart money moves in an economic crisis, underemployment, severance packages, and what you need to know about bear markets. The Great Reset webinar replay, free at realinvestmentadvice.com. realinvestmentadvice.com.
Life is a series of events. How long will your retirement last? More importantly, how long will your retirement funds last? You can plan for a successful retirement with RIA Advisors' free financial planning tool, MyBlocks. It's our online modular manager for your money and your life. Does your vision of retirement match up to reality? MyBlocks can help to determine how much you'll need and how to achieve that goal. Create your own personal financial vision for the next decade with MyBlocks, our free tool at RIAadvisors.com. That's RIAadvisors.com.
For the best proprietary stock and ETF analysis by Lance Roberts, subscribe now to the new professional version of Real Investment Advice, RIA Pro. You'll get the expanded newsletter and critical investment information you need with the professional version of Real Investment Advice, RIA Pro. Subscribe now at realinvestmentadvice.com and click on the RIA Pro tab. The Pro site is now operational. Subscribe now at realinvestmentadvice.com and click on the RIA Pro tab. RIA Pro.
Can't catch the whole show now? Listen to our podcast later at realinvestmentadvice.com.
It's 6:31, so let me apologize this morning. Been on a bit of a rant this morning, just kind of fired me up on a Wednesday, and since we're all just streaming and podcast today, only a few of you will actually see or hear these comments. And I couldn't say a lot of these things that I would normally, I would like to. Well, what I'm saying today, I couldn't say these on when we're actually streaming on our radio station because they're very conservative and they wouldn't like these.
But you have said nothing to apologize for.
Right, but the radio station certainly wouldn't like it. So you get the raw, unedited version today. And then tomorrow we go back on the edit.
Because nobody's on the road.
Exactly. But look, let's talk about something here. Let me read something to you. And actually, it's interesting because Brent put this on my notes page this morning, and he didn't even know what I was going to talk about. He didn't know I was going to go off on this rant this morning, right? And he actually put this on my note page. When you see that in order to produce, you need to obtain permission from men who produce nothing. When you see that money is flowing to those who deal, not in goods, but in favors. When you see that men get richer by graft and by pull than by work, and your laws don't protect you against them, but protect them against you. When you see corruption being rewarded, Moderna, and honesty becoming a self-sacrifice, you may know that your society is doomed. That was Ayn Rand in Atlas Shrugged in 1957. And it's interesting because there's a lot of things that we have written in the past, George Orwell's 1984, that predicted these dystopian futures that have now come to pass. And we are seeing that evolution in society, which has occurred throughout every society and every country throughout history. And that, Ayn Rand, as an example, in 1957, she just didn't make this stuff up. I mean, she wasn't sitting around one day and goes, if you do this and this is, A plus B equals C. No, she had studied history and looked at, Rome and Greece and France and England all throughout history. And every one of these countries went through the exact same progression, which is also the exact same progression that we're going through now. But we could fix it. See, we could fix it if we wanted to. And, we've got an election coming up as a good example. Now, really, the best person the Democrats can come up with is Joe Biden. I mean, really? That's the best person that you can put on the national stage? Whether or not you like Donald Trump is irrelevant, but that's really the best choice that we could come up with as a nation. That's the best person that we could come up with to run our country. The guy we were going to put in charge of a country, that was him.
They may have to remind him this morning he's running.
Different story. The point, my point about this is simply this, is that you don't really have a choice in who gets to run for president. That is done by a very small group, the 0.05% of the population. They are the ones that elect who runs for president and who doesn't. You don't. The top 0.05%. That actually happens to be the top 0.05% of the most well-connected, richest individuals in the country, in most cases. But even once we elect them, and this goes for congressmen and senators, et cetera, even though once we elect them and put them in, we now have these 500 people that make decisions for the entire country. And are they operating on your best wishes? Or are they operating on the demands that come in from their biggest sponsors, who happen to be U.S. corporations? At what point did democracy move from being a republic that was by and for the people to a republic that was by and for the corporations? We keep allowing increases in corporate contributions to funding campaigns. And what do you expect is going to happen when a bill is written? Really, we're going to pass a bill. The House just passed this bill, $3 trillion for all kinds of bailouts for the country. $3 trillion. It's 1,800 pages. Do you think that Nancy Pelosi actually sat down in her basement and wrote an 1,800-page bill? No.
She hasn't read that 1,800-page bill.
Of course not. These bills, every bill that's passed is written by a corporation to start with. And these the corporate lobby groups are the ones that write these bills. They submit them to their already paid for sponsor in Washington, and they then pass these bills. They don't read them. They don't understand. They don't understand the impacts. But if you want to fix these things, right? If you want to create better economic prosperity, if you want to get people off the government till, you've got to increase the capacity of individual Americans to expand their wealth, to grow, to become more wealthy. But when we do things like Federal Reserve bailouts, and we have the Federal Reserve injecting capital into companies to keep them going because we're afraid of the bankruptcy process, which is why it was established to start with, we erode the ability and capacity for the average individual American to prosper. This is why we, after the financial crisis, we had all this conversation about the wealth gap, right? The top 10% versus the bottom 90. And here we go again doing exactly the same thing. So it will no longer be the wealth gap between the top 10 and the bottom 90. It's going to be the wealth gap between the top 5 and the bottom 95. And the problem with this is that because we don't fix the issues, if you want Americans to prosper, look, Bill Clinton had the right idea. He tried to cap executive pay. He said executives can't make more than $1 million. Great, no problem. He had the right idea. The problem was he didn't go far enough. So all these corporations went to stock options, grants, stock buybacks, all this other stuff to incentivize and increase the wealth of those at the very top of the ladder at the expense of those at the bottom. If you want to fix the wealth gap problem, you say, look, CEO pay can be no more than 4 times the average pay of the worker for the rest of the corporation in all forms of compensation. So whenever they file their taxes in any type of form of compensation, it can't be 4 or 5 times. Pick your number. I'm just throwing out a number, but they can't. Danny is the CEO of the company. He can't make more than 5 times the salary of the secretary. All of a sudden, when you do that, if Danny wants to make $5 million a year, he's got to pay everybody else more money at the bottom end of the ladder, right? And so it brings up the prosperity of the rest of the country, and all of a sudden, well, we can start to solve the wealth inequality problem. If you want to fix the debt problem, which has exacerbated and devastated families all across this country, go back to requiring people to have a 20% down payment for a house. If you cannot save money and save 20% for a down payment on a house, you can't afford a house because there's expenses, maintenance, upkeep, repair, all the stuff that goes along with insurance, property taxes, all the other things that go on with the house. You can't afford a house if you can't save 20% down payment. But Lance, people need a house. No, they don't. They can rent until they can afford to save up and buy a house. The house is a representation of success and achievement of the American dream. It is not the American dream. Start doing things that lead to better economic prosperity for the masses, and you create better wealth and economic prosperity for the whole. The reason that the greatest generation was the greatest generation is because they came back from the war, they manufactured, we built everything for the rest of the world, and guess what they had? No debt. They did not use credit cards. They didn't have bank debt. We didn't have government debt. We weren't running $1 trillion deficit. And we had better economic prosperity. If you want it, you got to go get it. You can't sit around and let the government say, here, we'll pay for it, because it doesn't happen. You cannot recycle tax dollars to get better economic growth. I'm sorry, I'm done. I'm out.
So I'd like to announce that Lance is going to announce his campaign today.
Mic drop.
No. But the common theme here is that unfortunately the government's not working for the people. They're working for the corporations. And so at the root of this is the PACs, the political action committees, because they have such strength that you and I just don't have.
Right.
And so that's the unfortunate part, is because they know who's paying the bills. They know, there's been new things enacted where I guess they can't go work directly for a lobbyist right away, but these guys they get out of Congress making millions of dollars. It's a no-brainer, right? Go sell your soul to the devil, I guess, and you're going to be taken care of.
Yeah.
And that's the unfortunate part, because therein lies the problem, that we aren't represented fairly or accurately. Mm. And it's all about the big corporations, which there in turn produces the wealth gap.
Right. Well, it's just like, I was having a conversation today about student loan debt, and there was this young individual, young person on the internet complaining about her $87,000 of student loan debt. Now, she had $87,000 in student loan debt that she had taken out to go get a journalism degree.
but she can't get a job in journalism because she didn't graduate. She's one class short of her graduation to get her degree, and she can't get a job in journalism, which is a very tough gig to get and make any money at anyway. You're not going to make $87,000 worth of income being a journalist these days, unless you can actually, land in maybe a national media gig. She ain't going to get there. But that's not going to happen, right? You take out all this debt to get a degree that you cannot create, real income with, but yet you now want it to be forgiven, and you didn't even graduate and get your degree, right? You spent $87,000, didn't even get your degree, and then she's been out of college now for 7 years. And still can't pass one class to get her degree. I mean, this is the type of mentality that we have going on. You can't, and this is the problem with financial planning. This is the problem with education, financial education. Debt is not the answer to prosperity. The answer to prosperity is saving money, living below your means, spend less than you make. Live your life, be happy, but save money. If you save money, you can build wealth. You don't ever have to invest in the stock market. You don't need me and Danny to invest. You don't need to invest in the stock market. That's risk. To build wealth, you only have to save money. That's it. You just have to save money. All right. I'm serious. We're done with this conversation.
I don't believe we are.
When we come back from the break, Danny and I are going to talk about retirement, planning, unemployment, our latest webinar, all that stuff. Don't go away. Be right back.
Real Investment Show podcasts are now available on iTunes. Listen anyplace, anytime at iTunes.com.
Did you miss the Great Reset webinar? Fret not. The Great Reset webinar replay is available online now at realinvestmentadvice.com. In a post-COVID world of social distancing, face masks, and fear, you can thrive in the Great Reset. RIA advisors guide you through 12 smart money moves in an economic crisis, underemployment, severance packages, and what you need to know about bear markets. The Great Reset webinar replay, free at realinvestmentadvice.com. realinvestmentadvice.com.
Life is a series of events. How long will your retirement last? More importantly, how long will your retirement funds last? Plan for a successful retirement with RIA Advisors' free financial planning tool, MyBlocks. It's our online, modular manager for your money and your life. Does your vision of retirement match up to reality? MyBlocks can help to determine how much you'll need and how to achieve that goal. Create your own personal financial vision for the next decade with MyBlocks, our free tool at RIAadvisors.com. That's RIAadvisors.com.
For the best proprietary stock and ETF analysis by Lance Roberts, subscribe now to the new professional version of Real Investment Advice, RIA Pro. You'll get the expanded newsletter and critical investment information you need with the professional version of Real Investment Advice, RIA Pro. Subscribe now at realinvestmentadvice.com and click on the RIA Pro tab. The Pro site is now operational. Subscribe now at realinvestmentadvice.com and click on the RIA Pro tab. RIA Pro.
Get daily investment news you can use, delivered at the speed of the internet. Sign up for the Real Investment Report now at realinvestmentadvice.com.
All right. I'm off my soapbox this morning. Just everybody calm down.
What can we do to get him going
Dwayne,
again?
Don't email me. I know you're listening, right? This is my liberal cousin in Utah. Don't even bother emailing me. I'm not going to respond. So anyway, Danny, you had a webinar this weekend.
We did. We had a webinar, The Great Reset. So talking about some of the things that people are experiencing, going through right now. Very unfortunate time that a lot of people are having to make tough decisions, right? And so we talk about responsibilities, kind of the overall theme of kind of what we talked about today at the heart of it. But, one of the things I think that is tough right now is some of the decisions you have to make. like I was mentioning earlier, one of the biggest questions we received, probably about 100 questions, Lance, and one of the number one questions was, what do I do with my 401k? Do I roll it over? Do I keep it here? How do I, do I get on Cobra? A lot of people are working later and later, so we are seeing people who are, they weren't intending on retiring, but now they have to determine, do I get on Cobra for a bit, then go to Medicare? Do I sign up for Medicare? I'm still looking for another job. Lots of these questions that are, I think, pretty common themes. And so we always want to be careful when we're navigating these types of things and, trying to recreate a paycheck, because right now you may have a bit of an opportunity in some ways because, RMDs have been lifted for the year, required minimum distributions. If you're over 70 and a half or now 72, if you hadn't had to start taking them already. Lots of changes have happened from a legislation standpoint and rules and regulations as far as what we can do. Very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. So it's tough to navigate. And so that's what the intent is of the webinar, to give you a little bit of ammunition to really make sure that you know what to do, how to do it. And we're actually going to do another one. This one's going to be called This is War. And this one's going to be, last one's a little bit more conceptual. This one's going to be, here's exactly what you need to do. Here's where you need to go. And I think this is really important because we don't want to make a bad decision here. You don't want to screw up on the healthcare aspect, because if you do Medicare, your premiums, you could have a permanent penalty. So we have to be cautious. We're getting lots of calls about this. I'm sure it's on lots of your minds. But don't hesitate. We love all of your questions. Go to realinvestmentadvice.com. Go to Ask Lance. Contact us. We answer those questions very quickly. We love it when you guys, we get to interact, because you give us a lot of good information as well. But so one of the things is, what do I do with this 401k? And this is a tough question because, most people say, well, do I keep the 401k because I have some creditor protection? Mm-hmm. And I think that's the biggest aspect of people when you look at that. The issue is, well, here in Texas, you typically, judges they're not going to judge against your retirement account anyways here in Texas.
IRAs are protected, yeah.
But you're going to have a lot less flexibility, and you're not going to be able to move nearly as quickly. And so in an environment like that we're in right now, we want to be very nimble. And I think that, we've changed a lot of processes, whereas we've never been day traders. We've never traded, we're still not now.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're not day traders now.
Yeah.
But we've been a lot more active in this market.
Well, and you've had to, right? You've had to take advantage of opportunities, but it's also been about risk-reward scenarios. So maybe getting in, taking some profits off the table, and doing so quickly so that, over the weekend something comes out, the opposite of Moderna.
Exactly.
But, those are things that we have to look at. And so you also want that more flexibility. So one of the things that we look at with our clients is, how do you recreate this paycheck? We're having lots of conversations surrounding that. Should you be doing Roth conversions right now? Maybe you're going to have a little bit less in income. These are things that we need to look at, that you need to look at, to make sure that you're taking advantage of every opportunity there. So I want you to look at this. If you've been laid off, if you have received a paycheck, I know it sucks. There's no way around it. But I want you to look at this with your glass half full, because there are a lot of planning opportunities that you could be taking advantage of. And so, talk to your financial advisor. You guys should be having conversations around this. If you don't have one, and you just need some help or just want to, kick some tires, call us. We'll help you. But I think that you need to use this as a great opportunity, because who knows, there's going to be more legislation that's probably going to change what's happening here in the next month or two. Maybe there's going to be even more opportunities. But as this thing progresses, we just don't want you to leave any chips on the table.
Yeah. And again, as these, you never know from one day to the next, what the government's going to do next, right? What's going to be the next bailout bill, what's going to be the next, spending bill, whatever it is. And so, you just want to make sure that you're being, at least aware of these changes that are occurring, what penalties are being removed, potentially what opportunities may exist. But you also don't want to fall into the trap of doing things like taking a distribution from your 401k if you don't really need to. They make it kind of sound good on the surface, like, oh, you're in a little trouble right now, go borrow against your 401k. No, don't. But there's all kinds of negative consequences of that, even if they remove the penalties for the withdrawal, right? But you're taking money out that you put in pre-tax that was growing pre-tax. You're taking that out as a loan, which you're paying an interest back on that, but then you pay it back with after-tax dollars. So your actual effective interest rate on that loan is extremely high. So you don't want to do that unless you just look. And if you're in a financial burden and you've got to do it, you got to do it. I mean, sometimes we just don't have a choice, but it should be your last opportunity to go do that. So, but these are things that you go through that you want to make. Just all I'm saying is just you want to make sure you understand all the facts and the ramifications before you go do something.
And see how quickly things have changed as well. Now you can actually take out up to $100,000, avoid the 10% penalty, pay the taxes over a 3-year time frame, or put the funds back into the account. Now, there's also lots of misinformation out there saying that, well, you can do that, but you can also do that with the Roth, do the conversion, and then pay those taxes over a 3-year time frame. And that's not the case. So there is some misinformation. This is why you have to be extremely careful. You need to look at this within a financial plan. And I'm not opposed to you moving funds from, your pre-tax to after-tax dollars. I think it's probably going to be a very wise thing, because in the future, like we've talked about, we're going to see higher taxes.
Taxes are going up.
Yeah. And then you start thinking about the Secure Act that passed over the holidays in December and what that did to change the limitations as far as it killed the stretch IRA. So if you thought you were going to leave a legacy, pass this down to your children, well, you still can. But now they have a very small window of when they have to take these funds out. Could be at peak earnings, could be at much higher taxes. You just don't have the flexibility that we once had. So we need to take every precaution, take advantage of every scenario and situation that may be out there, and begin to move some funds from those pre-tax to after-tax dollars. Now, it needs to be very strategic, needs to be surgical, and you don't just do everything all at once. But if you do it little by little, I think that's where you're going to see some significant benefits. We typically will illustrate that for clients, say, hey, here's how much you should do. But then you need to talk to your CPA as well to make sure that we're not missing anything.
Right.
But this needs to be a holistic view on any of these things you're doing, and you need to make sure that you're up to speed, because those rules, and it's funny, you talk to CPAs about some of these things and say, well, hey, so what does this mean? Well, we're still waiting for clarification. What do you mean? It's just passed. You're waiting on clarification of what? Well, the attorneys have to tell us what it really means. And that's unfortunate because that's the way most of these laws are.
Yeah.
And so on some of these things, we're still waiting on some clarification. However, we know what we shouldn't do right now, or maybe what we shouldn't do. So we say, hey, let's take a step back. Let's wait, but let's be prepared for this and take advantage of it.
Exactly. Well, let's talk about some good news.
What you got?
This is important. I mean, we're now reopening, right?
Yeah.
Getting the economy back up and running, right? Businesses are opening. Last night, Fox 31 reported that the Den reopened last night. That is America's first strip club to reopen.
Oh, wow.
And so all the dancers are clothes off, mask on. That's the...
I thought there's like some drive-thrus or something somewhere in Ohio or somewhere.
No.
They shut those down too?
I guess those were down. But anyway, so first strip club back open, and one of the dancers very happy. She made $21 last night.
Oh, wow.
At their grand reopening. Again, you can't make this stuff up. Nevada brothels also looking to reopen. So they will take your temperature, and everybody has to wear masks.
So our priorities are so screwed up in this country. You can open a strip club, but you can't go to church?
Can't go to church, but you can go to a strip club or a brothel. We can take care of that. But the churches are reopening though. There's some guidelines now. Seat every other row. Families can sit together. We're starting to get back to normal, and that's a good thing, right? I mean, one thing we're going to look back on probably in the next 18 months is we're going to look back and go, shutting down the economy was the absolutely worst decision we could have made. It didn't really change the outcome of things, whatever it was. But I have a feeling we'll look back and say we're not ever going to do that again. But we try to make the best decisions we can at the time based on the information we have, and whether it was a mistake or not, we'll see in the future. But the good news is we are getting the economy back reopened, and this is going to be important because next thing we need to see is how does the employment recovery start to look like? Is it an immediate rehire that we get everybody back to work, or is it going to be a very long, drawn-out process and more of a kind of a an L-shaped recovery rather than a V. So those are the things we'll be talking about here over the next few months here on the show as we begin this process. But in the meantime, if you need any help, get by the website, realinvestmentadvice.com. Our new blog post out this morning, as well as our newsletters on the website. Of course, like Danny said earlier, if you need help with anything at all, simply click the Ask a Question button. We answer all those questions every single day. Happy to help you. realinvestmentadvice.com. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow on the next edition of the Real Investment Show right here, realinvestmentadvice.com.
It's a rich man's world.